All right, so I'm going to jump in. I just want to welcome everyone, and I'm actually going to share my slides. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. I am Mark Bogosian. I am the director of the Quality of Life Grants Program here at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And I do just really want to welcome you to this Quality of Life applicant technical assistance webinar. Just if you need to turn on the closed captioning, there's a little button at the bottom right hand called live transcript. Press on that and that should start right away. So I'm actually going to go over a whole bunch of information really quickly. Just a lot of it is in the application guidelines, but I'm also going to take some time to talk about the two new grants program grants that we're offering this cycle, which are the Racial Equity Grants Program and the Rural Unserved and Unserved Grants Program. And then I'm hoping that we're going to have some time for our questions and answers. If you do have a question during the webinar, please type them into the question and answer box and not the chat box. That way, we'll be able to get them all in one place. If you do put something in the chat box, we definitely will get that also. But if you have something technical, perhaps put it in the chat box. So let's make sure my slides are working. And all right, so this is the email to to ask us questions after the webinar. If you have any questions that you either haven't been able to ask during the webinar or that weren't responded to, what we're going to do is we're going to collect them all, aggregate them, and answer them in a FAQ document that we're going to be posting on our website. And just so the deadline for these emailed questions is next Tuesday, September 13th. And before I begin, I just want to remind everybody that these grants are for nonprofit organizations. So our federal cooperative agreement with the Department of Health and Human Services, the Administration for Community Living, through them, we're not able to provide grants to individuals or money or funds to individuals. And in another slide, if you do have questions about individuals, I will address that. These grants are for nonprofit organizations with IRS 501c3 tax status, municipalities, state governments, school districts, colleges, universities, recognized tribal entities, and other institutions like community health centers or veterans hospitals. This 2022 second cycle Quality of Life Grants Program offers both direct effect and the priority impact grants. And the deadline for these are on October 13th. So these grant projects are going to start on January 1st, 2023, and the closing dates are going to be noted both here in the webinar and in the guidelines. So just also, I'm sure you're aware because you've seen in our other materials, we're unable to provide individual pre-award assistance, either by phone or email. But if you have a technical question or a question about the application process, please send that to qol@christopherreeve.org. And that was just on the last slide. So if you do have a request or need any assistance as an individual, please contact our information specialists. They are a team of our National Paralysis Resource Center folks who are here to answer any questions, help guide you through any process. You can either reach them by phone. The phone number is up here. You can schedule a call, or you can send them a question through our website. And our website is www.christopherreeve.org. Here's just a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing today. We're just going to start with some general information about the foundation and our programs. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about, eligibility, funding restrictions, allowable expenses, and I'm going to share a few examples from each grant opportunity to show you, what is kind of allowable, and then I'm going to show you how to access the grants portal, and then hopefully we're going to just wrap this up going over the application review process, and then just kind of explain how the awards are made, and what we expect of our grantees once they are awarded. So what's really important to know is that we are paralysis focused, and that grant funding must be targeted to projects that will serve individuals living with paralysis, their families, and caregivers. So we use a really functional definition of paralysis, which is, difficulty or inability to use your arms or legs due to neurological conditions. And that could include, and it's certainly not limited to, but spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, stroke, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, ALS, post-polio syndrome, and a whole host of others. So just again, all of these grants must be specifically geared towards serving people living with paralysis. We will also support programs that do include people with co-occurring disabilities, as well as community projects, and I'll talk about that. However, the projects must serve a majority of people living with paralysis, and in some instances, at least 3 individuals living with paralysis, and or their families or caregivers, such as like the nursing home transition. Because of the type of funding, it may only be 4 people that you'll be transitioning, but we can talk about that. So just know that we have been funded federally since 2014 through the, again, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and that is the Administration for Community Living, and the National Paralysis Resource Center. Here we provide deeply needed information and programs and individualized support, like I just talked about with the information specialists, and we provide this assistance to the over 5.3 Americans that are living with paralysis. And I love this slide because it tells a whole lot about what we do here at the National Paralysis Resource Center. And the foundation of this, the National Paralysis Resource Center, is really up at that top left-hand side, where we see our information specialists, and those are the folks who provide that one-on-one assistance to over 117,000 people, and they've also received assistance in over 170 languages. We have a military and veterans program, which serves our servicemen and women and their very unique needs. We have a peer and family support program with over over 500 now, over 500 certified peer mentors, and they have served over 20,000 people. We also have a virtual community of over 3 million users who not only visit our website, but they they interact with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. So I invite all of you to please check all of those out and just interact with us there as well. We also, I kind of, let me just, if I can jump back up here, you'll see that we do also up here, we provide a whole bunch of health related materials. So I'm going to jump back to that slide I was just on. And, all of these resources that we offer are free. And, that includes our flagship publication, which is the Paralysis Resource Guide. We have wallet cards, we have on various issues like sepsis or deep vein thrombosis or other secondary conditions. There are publications on bladder and bowel management, pressure injuries, or advocating for the rights of children. We also have state fact sheets and a whole bunch of resources that are available, and we urge you to reach out to us for any of these materials, and we will send those to you free of charge, and for not only your organization but for the people that you serve as well. So the Quality of Life Grant Program, the main focus is that we really impact and empower people living with paralysis. And again, their families and caregivers are a very important part of this. And, the whole goal is to foster inclusion, involvement, and community engagement while promoting health and wellness. And we do this in all 50 states and territories. Before you begin your application, we really recommend that you read the application and program guidelines. It's going to provide information about the programs, about the funding tier descriptions. We have new eligibility requirements and criteria in there. It'll talk about funding restrictions and other allowable expenses, as well as it has all of the application questions in there. And these guidelines are on our website. And also on our website is, an overview of our grants program and an overview of the application process. And really, we do urge you to read all of these documents and resources. It'll help familiarize yourself with the process and to really better prepare you to, submit an application. And, one thing I do want to add is that, also on our website is a People First language guide, which are guidelines for discussing people with disabilities. And we really do ask that you take a look at that. And, words matter, and using the appropriate types of words when talking about people with disabilities is, not only very respectful, but also, just very important to all people. We also have a quick guide to establishing evaluation indicators. And the reason that's important is because the grant application is going to require you to describe evaluation indicators that you're going to use to measure the success of your program or your project. The indicators are going to be a combination of both input and output indicators, and it must be measurable. So you're going to be asked to describe the evaluation methods, what are you going to use? And that could be anything, right? You could be doing surveys or interviews or focus groups or just, review of program documents. But please take a look at that, because that is an important part of the application process, is telling us how you're going to be able to evaluate the program to let us know how successful it's been. So here's the timeline for this funding cycle. As I said, we're going to accept questions through September 13th. Again, that's it's QOL@ChristopherReeve.org. Send your emails there. We're going to put them all together in a fact sheet, and the deadline is for the applications is on October 13th at 11:59 p.m. And I just need to, state that, no exceptions will be made if you miss this deadline. And it's, not because we're mean or anything, it's the system shuts it down. So at 11:59 on October 13th, everything will be shut down. So what we do then is we review the applications through two separate review committees and this time it'll be from October 17th through December 6th. Grants will be awarded at the end of December. And as I mentioned earlier, the grant projects themselves will begin on January 1st, 2023, which is just right around the corner. I mentioned this earlier, applications are accepted from only 501c3 nonprofit organizations, but again, that can include municipal and state governments, park departments, etc., school districts, colleges, universities, recognized tribal entities, and community health centers, veterans, hospitals, etc. So an organization must have its own 501c3. It can be part of a chapter or a national organization that has its own 501c3 nonprofit status. Fiscal sponsors cannot apply, and 501c4 organizations that do not have their own 501c3 are also not eligible. There's a new eligibility requirement And as you all know, as I mentioned earlier, we're funded through the Administration for Community Living. And so what this is really aimed at is, building community capacity. So previously, there was a one-year waiting period before reapplying for a grant after you've received a grant. So after you've received a grant, 1 year after it's closed, you're then able to reapply. But with this new initiative, this community capacity building initiative, we're really striving to create a level playing field and provide opportunities for organizations that are applying. And so what we're saying is that the new waiting period is a 5-year waiting period for applying for something within the same category. So I know that might sound a little confusing. So any other category or tier will still be a 1-year waiting period from the close of your original grant. So an example would be, let's say, there are 5 tiers of funding that are available twice a year. And if your organization received, let's say, a tier 1 adaptive sports grant this cycle, you'd have to wait 1 year after the grant has closed before you could apply for any other quality of life grant. So that could be a tier 2, a tier 3, a tier 4, tier 5, but you could not apply for a tier 1 adaptive sports grant within that 5 years, but you could apply for another tier 1 in anything else, facility modification, etc. I'm just going to take a sip of water. If you have any questions, about this, please just email qol@christopherreeve.org, and we'll hopefully be able to answer your questions on that. So, all right, I'm gonna cough a second. In accordance with our federal cooperative agreement, we are prohibited from funding certain areas. So the first thing that I really want to talk about is anything that, grants that go to individuals. So we cannot fund grants to individuals, and that also includes any kind of money that is given to an individual participant in a program. So let's unpack that a little bit. So like a stipend or an incentive for a participant in a program cannot be funded. A stipend or an honorarium could be paid to a speaker at an event, and that's allowable because that would be a program cost. But money cannot be given to an individual, to attend a program. Like scholarships could also be provided, but let's say therapeutic horseback riding or some other kind of services, but the money can never exchange hands with the person receiving the services. So another example would be respite care. Money could not go to the family to pay for the respite services, but it could go to the organization that's going to provide the respite services that are going to be provided to the organization. And the same with travel reimbursements. Travel reimbursements for participants to take part in a program, that is something that you could do for personnel, but not for somebody to take part in a program. So let's say a coach for a sports team, or for the whole team to travel somewhere. That's an allowable travel reimbursement. However, the money cannot go to any of the individuals that are participating in the program. All of this is really about gifts to individuals, and I will, talk about this a little bit too. So the idea behind a gift to individuals is anything that it could be just, given to somebody. So, here on this slide, we have a whole bunch of different things. It could be a ready bag for disaster preparedness. It could be a t-shirt or a trophy or a uniform, supplies or materials. So here's something, right? So supplies and materials are certainly allowable, but let's say you're doing a virtual camp and you have, crayons or art supplies or exercise bands. So anything that would be given to somebody that they can physically keep is not allowable. Internet service would also be considered a gift, or an Amazon gift card. So, for, let's say, a movie night or book clubs, anything like that. So it's a little tricky because, let's say, you're having a camp and we fund supplies there. The kids, let's say, are using construction paper, glue, scissors, and they're doing that on site, and they make a project and they go home with like a paper airplane or something, or some other finished project, and that would not be considered a gift. But if they went home with the scissors and the bottle of leftover glue and the construction paper, that would be considered a gift. So that's why it's a little tricky now that we're in this kind of post-pandemic world where everything's still virtual, or a lot of things are still virtual. You have to think about, it has to be something that can be loaned, like an iPad. You can loan out 10 iPads to 10 children for 12 weeks and collect them at the end of the 12 weeks, and then you can offer them to somebody else, but you really can't do that with like a paintbrush, So just be a little thoughtful about the kinds of supplies, especially if it's a virtual program. Also, on our funding restrictions are for-profit companies, and this includes, nonprofit organizations that are acting as a fiscal sponsor for a nonprofit organization. So again, it's only organizations that do have their own 501c3. And there we go. Research is another, and rehabilitative therapy. And research is absolutely something that we cannot fund, and rehabilitative therapy is also restricted. However, we can assist people that are living with paralysis to participate in exercise opportunities. Those are allowable. So those programs, that would use a physical or occupational therapists that work directly with, a person living with paralysis, that's considered part of rehabilitative therapy. But an exercise opportunity that's facilitated by somebody who, for example, has a bachelor's degree in exercise science or is a certified fitness instructor, that would be an allowable expense. And equipment. So equipment is, I'm going to say it's allowable if you're doing it through a loan closet. Otherwise, again, the equipment would be something that could be given to individuals that would be considered a gift. So requests for loan closets, they must include a specific period of time. Now, let's say a device loan is usually 4 to 6 weeks, and it could sometimes be up to 9 weeks. And what that would do is enable an individual to try it out, familiarize themselves with whatever assistive technology or durable medical equipment it is, and that's before they would acquire it on their own. Open-ended or long-term loan closets will not be considered, and this also applies to ramps. And I know that some people have had questions about that, especially for the new rural program, where ramps are very much needed. Unfortunately, that's part of our funding restrictions through our cooperative agreement. I want to say a little bit more about equipment, in that equipment can be provided if it provides access or promotes independence. So here's a few examples, like, adaptive strollers is part of a program that they're not given out to individuals, but they remain on site. That's allowable. Or a transfer chair in a community pool, or stair lift, or an examination table at a community health center. That's providing access. Promoting independence would be something like a like a scale, right? So because knowing your weight promotes independence, it promotes good health, it allows people to remain healthy. As we all know, being overweight can lead to a myriad of chronic health conditions. Beach wheelchairs, would both be providing access to the beach, but it also promotes independence. It allows somebody to participate in an activity, be at the beach, and just again, that could also fall under providing access. But just those are the two areas where we are allowed to fund equipment. Gym equipment that provides access is allowable. However, not gym equipment that you have to have a physical therapist or a medical type personnel kind of guiding you through the process, because that would be seen as therapy. Prototypes, the development of any kind of intellectual property rights, those are not allowable, nor are funding for construction of buildings or any kind of major construction. And I know that sometimes like it's a little difficult to kind of understand, but so we can do funding for support for like simple accessibility modifications of existing structures or even playgrounds or trails. Like a request for simple bathroom accessibility modifications would be something that there's already a bathroom in place. This would be to include grab bars, accessible toilets, sinks, but we couldn't fund a new building, the building of a new bathroom or a major renovation of the existing bathroom. Another example would be for an accessible lift or an elevator. Like this would be allowable because it provides access and promotes independence, but we cannot fund like the excavation or the construction of the elevator shaft, as that would be considered major construction. All of these are in the application guidelines. So again, I do urge you to kind of look at those. And just a quick note on like lifts and elevators. Lifts are generally simple plug-in devices that help people get from up a few stairs or from one floor to another, and that's not a major modification. But again, like the construction of an elevator shaft would be. I do want to touch on new playground construction. So, because we get a lot of questions about this every year. So again, as I was saying, like modifications for playgrounds or trails, they are allowable. But these again are pretty much minor modifications and reallocation, relocations of older non-accessible playgrounds. So we just can't fund any playgrounds that will be entirely new. So for example, we get a bunch of application requests from school districts or towns that currently have like no inclusive or no accessible options for children and their families, and they come to us and they're completely renovating the non-accessible playground to make it fully accessible and inclusive, and that's allowable. They're probably installing either new playground equipment or pour in surfacing, and that's allowable. But again, not if it's a new playground. If the playground is in the same area, let's say it's on the same school campus, but it's going to be relocated just in a different section, that is allowable as well. It's not that it's going to be across town or across down the street. So it just needs to be in that same general location. And just quickly go through these. These are just a few more things that I think are really important to really pay attention. Anything that has to do with fundraising or lobbying, those are restrictions. Anything that cannot be completed within the allotted time, 12 months for the direct effect, and please see the other timelines. One of the most important things, and we see this all the time, is food. We cannot fund and pay for food, and that even includes water. So, no food, for camps, no food for a trip. So, we can do lodging, which I'll talk about on the next slide, but we cannot do any kind of meals, per diem, board or lunch, beverages, alcohol, and again, water is a big one. And we are also not allowed to fund any medical services. Allowable expenses, and you're probably asking, so what can we fund? And there's a whole bunch of them. So if this is your first time applying, you'll really be surprised at pretty much everything can be funded. We provide a whole range of programmatic expenses, and that can really be anything from personnel, consultants, contracted workers, or entrance fees, transportation costs, facility rentals. We also are allowed to fund travel. So please pay attention to those. The guidelines that we posted here, those are the same that we have to adhere to through our federal cooperative agreement. I do want to mention that administrative costs are also allowable, and that is a de minimis indirect cost rate of no more than 10%. However, if your organization has a negotiated federal indirect cost rate agreement, or NICRA, a lot of universities do have those, we will allow what that rate is, but you will need to be able to provide us with the NICRA contract. And I do just lastly want to say that programmatic expenses are really something that are much more, I don't want to say acceptable, but I do want to say that they're considered more favorably than any kind of general operating expense or large capital projects. There's one other thing that I do want to mention, because we're in the nursing home transition cycle with the priority impact. So this is the only area where funds can be used to purchase equipment. So on here, you'll see some, some information. We can do anything that can help set people up in their homes, and that could be, like a Hoyer lift. It could be even a deposit for their housing. It can be any kind of like a washer or stove, or any kind of adaptive piece of equipment that they need. So this is really to help people transition into, out of a nursing home and into their own living environment. And we'll talk a lot about this program, but I do just want to note that this is the only program, that we are allowed to use any kind of funds towards anything that would appear as a gift to an individual. And again, this is to really help facilitate a successful transition. It's really, really important for you to be specific in your funding request. And I'll give you a few examples here. So if you're requesting funds for equipment for a loan closet, please be specific in the type of equipment that you're interested in purchasing. So for example, you would say, we're looking to purchase 4 eye gaze devices at $4,000 per device for a total of $16,000. Or if you're applying for part of a program operation, let's say travel, you have 4 trips to the demo center. And we would need to see 532 miles at 62 cents per mile, and that would bring us to a total of 330. So we need to see that kind of detail. Please do not just request a blanket $25,000 for equipment. We see this a lot with parks or playgrounds. They'll say, $25,000 equipment. We have no idea what that's going to, and that will not be generally even looked at from that point on. So please be specific, and though they're not required, it's really helpful to have vendor quotes. And the vendor quotes that you include must be current at the time of the application. And we do really strongly recommend them. If you're, purchasing supplies from, a website like Amazon, just, screenshot that if it's not an organization or a company that is able to give you a specific vendor quote. So I do just quickly want to talk about, and I'm trying to look at the time here, because I know that we're a little past a half hour and we still have a ways to go. So, just our grants actually that we're offering this cycle are the Tier 1 direct effect, and those are very open, and we're looking to award at least 36 of those, up to $25,000. I'm going to talk specifically about that program. You see some examples here, and we're also providing only the priority impact as well, tiers 2 through 4. I'll talk a little bit about those as well, and especially the two new grants. We are not offering expanded impact this cycle. Expanded impact will be offered in the spring. Here's some examples of what the direct effect projects could be. Could be, as I mentioned earlier, adaptive sports or a camp. It could also be fitness and wellness or service animal program. It could also be a peer mentoring and support program. The types of programs that we do are, it could be wheelchair basketballs, wheelchairs for wheelchair basketball team. It could be a kayak for a rowing program. It could be a hydraulic lift at a pool. But we also, a lot of folks start to really go outside of the, the box, and they're offering really amazing programs on, let's say, an education series on sex and sexuality with the spinal cord, or we've funded this amazing program for preventing abuse and adaptive sports. That's something else. So anything that really is outside the boxes, the external reviewers also do love to see that. And that doesn't say that if you do put in an application for a picnic table at a community fairground, that that is also an allowable expense or type of project that we would fund. So the priority impact, I touched on this just a little, and I see that I haven't switched the slide here. So there are 3 different tiers. Tier 2 are grants of up to $30,000, and I'll go through these a little more in depth, but that's for respite caregiving, assistive technology, and a special program called COVID-19, addressing social isolation. Tier 3 are the grants that are up to $40,000. That's the nursing home transition, the racial equity, and the rural unserved and underserved. And Tier 4 are the grants of up to $50,000, and that is focused solely on employment. So I want to talk a little bit. I feel like I've skipped the slide here. I did. So here we are on Tier 2. So for Tier 2, these are the 3 grants that are up to $30,000 each. There's respite and caregiving, and we really recognize the importance of family and caregivers and the importance of providing respite, providing breaks, services that are both promising and even new service models. So we do recommend this program for those types of grants. We have assistive technology, which is different from our past assistive technology, which was solely focused on state AT programs. This is open to all organizations, and this is really looking at anything that's going to help increase independence of people living with paralysis, to really help them live more fully in their communities, and to enhance their social engagement, their employment, or their education, or any type of their improvement in quality of life through assistive technology. The COVID-19 is really focused on addressing social isolation. And as we were researching at the very beginning of the pandemic, we saw that social isolation was one of the had negative impacts on people living with paralysis. So these are programs that are really set out to negate those impacts of both, social, physical, medical negative impacts that happen due to social isolation. And nursing home transition is our third, part of tier 3, as is the racial equity and the rural underserved. I just want to talk a little bit about nursing home transition. These fund organizations that provide transition services for people to get them out of nursing homes and into their own living environments, or also it can help fund diversion services, which is keeping people from entering a nursing home. Our new program is the Racial Equity Grants Program. And if you're interested in this program, I really urge you to read the full program details and rationale on our website. This will provide all the information that you need, but I'll just quickly, say that we really ask that you examine the needs of your community. And just, these projects should identify how your organization aims to address, the injustices and the inequalities affecting, the target population, which, is people living with paralysis within your community that are, racially diverse or historically underserved. There's a whole bunch of areas that we go into in the program details, such as advocacy or education, anything addressing civil rights, anything about educating employees, employers or employees on accessible workforce issues. We're looking at health, we're looking at justice and civic issues. We're looking at even career, like eliminating barriers and creating new career opportunities that, lead individuals out of poverty and into gainful employment. Something to know about if you are applying, and again, please do read the full program rationale and details. You must define the project's targeted population. So don't just state, that this is going to serve a majority of people with color, majority of people of color, right? You must really specifically define the racially diverse and or historically underserved, underrepresented groups that you're going to be serving in this project or program. You're going to need to describe the relationships that you have with those communities, and you're going to need to describe the outreach for that they have in place or will have in place to serve those targeted populations. And lastly on that, you just also really are going to need to indicate, how you arrived at this figure and the data sources that you have used. So again, helpful to look at our impact and evaluation pieces, because that's going to help you kind of define those populations. The other area here, oh, I see that I'm still on that slide, so I just went past this slide. So this is the slide I was just talking about. The other grants program here is the Rural Unserved and Unserved. And, the aim of this program is to really promote accessibility and participation in rural communities. And again, this can be through a whole bunch of different focus areas. And again, I really do urge you to read the program details and rationale for this grants program, it'll talk about different things like, transportation or, assistive technology and durable medical equipment. Again, health, what are, rural community health centers or veterans hospitals needing? Do they need care coordination? Do they need telehealth? It also talks a little bit about like agriculture and access to healthy foods. For this program too, it's really important. You're going to need to indicate the rural areas that are being served. And on this slide, there are a few, resources or data sources that you can look at. Disability Counts Data Finder. That's an online tool that is going to let you, download disability data for every county in the United States. There's the, Disability in America map series. And again, that's a set of maps that, provide a whole bunch of information on disability. There's the Rural Health Grants Eligibility Analyzer, and that's from the Health Resources and Services Administration, which is HRSA. Again, you're going to need to indicate the number of people that are living with paralysis that are served. You're going to need to indicate how you arrived at those numbers and the data sources that you use. So please, again, with this especially, go and look at the the program description and the rationale. Tier 4 are employment grants, and these are grants up to $50,000, and these are grants that must be completed within 24 months. The others were 18 and 12 months. So this is specifically for employment grants, and employment grants are one of the foundation's top priorities because employment is fundamental in achieving and maintaining independence. It's also one of the most challenging obstacles to individuals living with paralysis. Employment projects should assist individuals that are living with paralysis to help them either enter or re-enter or remain or advance in the workplace. It should be creating pathways to meaningful living wage jobs, or provide job development services, and that could include education, adaptive technology, or career training, but all with the goal of obtaining gainful employment. So one thing to note too is that funds cannot provide stipends that could be given directly to workers or program participants as salaries or other incentives. So that would be part of that whole gifts to individuals. Quickly, just because I see we're coming up on time, all of this information is in the application guidelines and on our website. So please, you must use our grants portal to access the applications. You'll first see a logon page, which will ask for your information. One thing that I do need to say is that it's really important that you use a password that if this is an existing account, and if you don't know if you already have an account with us, please email us at qol@christopherreeve.org to ask. There's also a video tutorial on here on this webpage that'll show you how to do it. And again, the application guidelines really go through this pretty thoroughly. Once you do access this, you're going to come to the apply page. You will see the apply button. Again, you are only eligible to apply for one program per cycle. So you would either be applying for the direct effect or for one of the priority impact programs. As you do get onto the application itself, what you're going to see are, there's all of this information here, and the questions that we do ask are around eligibility and a proposal description, budget information. There's organization information, and we also ask for supporting documents. So please make sure that you do take a look at this. it's available both on our on our webpage, in our guidelines, and you can also download the questions in advance, which I think is really helpful to do. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But here are some of like what the questions look like. You'll see that they have character counts. They have they tell you how much is left. And one of the things to really think about is there's a way to take this and download it into a Word document and do it in Word and then cut and paste it back in. That is generally the most helpful way of doing that. I do want to quickly talk about the budget template. We do have a video on our website that's going to walk you through filling out the budget template, but just see at the top you're going to be asked all questions about your organization name, the project name. You'll be asked to fill this out. I'll go through in another slide just a quick show of how to fill it out. But again, we have a great video on our website. Again, if you're requesting indirect costs, you would put that under other costs, and that's where our de minimis rate of no more than 10% is allowable. Something new this year you're going to see is, let me just scroll over here, is something that it says funding gap. And what that does is it's automatically going to fill in for you, but it's going to be based on what the actual costs are versus what you're asking. So we'll be able to see the percentage, and that really helps us understand, how our funds are contributing to the total project budget, but also where there's a gap. So if it's a $60,000 program and you're asking for $13,000, we'd need to know where the other remaining funds are. Very quickly, like here's a very quick and fast example, but again, I urge you to look at our videos that are really super helpful on this. But in this example here, this organization is only requesting $24,750 with a total budget of $465,000. So note that you're not asking to put the entire project budget in this template. You're only putting in what you're asking from us. And so we'll, let's say in this example, you're going to be asking for personnel, equipment, and other costs. You list the total cost of each line, and then the total cost that you're requesting from the foundation. And in this case, the total costs are equaling $41,613, but you're only requesting $24,750. That would show up in the next thing, about the funding gap. But where you can address that is in this bottom page here, where it talks a little bit about what's committed and what's not. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so that's the page. So you're going to be able to show us what's been committed and what, you might have some other government funding, you might have some other foundation funding. If there's other, and you list whether it's committed or pending, that way we're able to see, what would happen if you didn't receive all of the money. What is our $25,000 or however much going to do if you didn't have the full budget? We also asked for a narrative on this, which really helps explain a little more, in detail. It gives us a much better idea of what the expenses are related to. And please just make sure that all of the expenses that are listed on this budget narrative are also on the budget template, and that they match. Make sure the numbers match. So many times we have narratives with different numbers and budget templates with different numbers, and that is a sure sign that the grant is not either going to be approved by the review committee, because if the numbers on the application aren't matching up, they have no way of knowing what the actual costs of the project are. So please make sure that all of your costs, whether on the template, the budget template, or in the narrative, that they match. And that really does help us. So once you do fill out all the questions, you're just going to hit that submit application budget, that's over there on the left-hand side. The minute you do that, you're going to get a confirmation page, and it's going to say your application has been submitted. You're also going to receive an email from us that'll pop up, and it will say your application has been submitted, and it's going to ask you to fill out a very quick, less than 1 minute survey. Just, that's going to help us improve what we do. So we please just ask you to do that as well. Only will take a moment or so. I'm not going to talk about the review process. We do have, a whole area on our website that talks about that. But as I mentioned earlier, it takes about 2 months. We have these, expert external reviewers who, really, they look at all of these different aspects of it, and they bring an unbiased and objective, lens and looking at these applications. And these are folks who are either, in the field, they're stakeholders, past, either living with paralysis or caregivers, doctors, lawyers, advocates, specialists in assistive technology, specialists in other areas. So, these are folks that have been well vetted and have, absolutely no, no other involvement. So we really rely on them very heavily. We then have an internal review, which consists of some of our board members and various staff members. And so again, that's a very long 2 months process. And then we do make sure that every single person who has applied, is informed. And, once you're informed, there'll be a whole bunch of information that then comes from us. I'm going to skip over these just because I see that we are still, kind of moving very quickly through this, and there's a few things that I'm hoping to get to some questions, but I do know that Parul and Maria, who are on the Quality of Life Grants team, have been responding to a bunch of you. So hopefully they've been able to get to most of your questions. I just want to note that it's that there are requirements that have to be adhered to. There's an interim report, and again, you can see up here when the interim reports are due for the different tiers. And then there's a final report, and the final report, both of these actually do really look at, the project's, progress, the challenges, what was the impact, again, which is where all those impact measures come in, and final expenditures. And we do, for our grantees, have reporting webinars throughout the year to assist you to, fill out these reports as well. We also do site visits, and at the very end of a grant award, Vanderbilt University does an evaluation, which is really very helpful. It helps us learn even more about your grant and about your whole process, and that information is also shared with the Administration for Community Living. And then, lastly, just closing out the grant, if you're awarded, again, the final report is both the narrative and the financial, and then we will then send a grant closure. I do want to just talk a little bit about grant termination, because it is just important to know, and we do reserve the right to terminate a grant if a project or a program is no longer within the funding parameters, or if you've failed to comply with any of the terms or conditions. And, I'm not saying that somebody's taking the money and taking a trip to Hawaii or so, but, there have been many a time where, a project has, either gone completely off course, has decided, they're not funding what they proposed, they're doing something completely different, and we do need to step in and terminate the grant. So what we always ask is that you're always in constant communication with us, to talk about anything that's happening in the program, talk to us about what you're experiencing, and we can help guide you. If a grant is terminated, unfortunately, It's usually we ask for a return of the grant funds. We also report, it's reported to the Internal Revenue Service, it's reported to the Office of Inspector General, and also the Administration for Community Living. And terminated organizations are barred from applying for future Reeve funds for 7 years. So, but always just try to work together and make sure that, things don't happen. I mean, things happen all the time, and we certainly saw that with COVID, but we will always work with you to, make sure that there are adjustments put in place in time before anything this drastic would happen. And then just lastly, again, I just do need to say that in adherence with our federal, the O&B requirements, we're really unable to comment on denied applications or provide any kind of programmatic direction when you're applying for a grant. So, it would be seen as providing unfair advantage to other applicants. So we're here to support you with any kind of technical questions that you have. And those we can certainly help you with. But again, if your application is not awarded, we are unable to, tell you exactly why. But what I will say is that, for each cycle, we receive sometimes up to 400 applications and are able to award only about 60. So just know that sometimes it's just that the competition was very, very fierce. We've seen so many organizations that, maybe it was their 3rd time or sometimes even their 4th time, and they're awarded. Some organizations have been awarded on their 1st time. So, please just continue to come back to us, and, continue to try to, work with us in a whole bunch of different ways as well, beyond just providing grant funds through, all of the programs that we do offer at the National Paralysis Resource Center. And with that, I do just want to say thank you. I know I said I would try to leave some time for question and answers. I'm just going to try to see if I can take a look and see if there's anything on here. You know what? I don't know if anybody answered this. There is a question here about assistive technology and durable medical equipment, short-term AT equipment loans. So somebody's are asking, how would you fund a ramp? So a ramp, a lot of organizations do see that as a type of assistive equipment that allows people the ability to get out of their houses. There are people that are unable to even leave their house or access their house due to their new or recent medical condition. A short-term loan on that would be providing a type of loan, a type of ramp that is able to be put up while the person is exploring other alternatives. And usually the organizations that do these kinds of programs have other types of programs which they can help with financial services. So I hope that did answer that. Internet would be another example where we can't provide internet. We can provide internet, let's say, through a device that's loaned. So through my mind is going blank right now, what they're called, like a Fire Stick or a hotspot. That's what they're called, hotspot. That could be loaned through on the tablet itself, and then that would be returned. So that would not be seen as a gift to an individual. I'm just trying to see if there are any other questions that I can answer quickly, because I know we're over time. I do want to thank you. If we don't get to you, through the question and answer here, as I said, we're going to aggregate these and post them on our FAQ. So with that, I do just want to say thank you. And if you, again, have any questions, please reach out to us at qol@christopherreeve.org. And thank you very much.